Okay, good afternoon. Welcome to the launch event, the book launch of Smell, Memory and Literature in the Black Country. It's a book that was edited by Rob Francis, my colleague in creative writing at the University of Wolverhampton, and myself. My name is Sebastian Groes. I'm a professor of English literature at the University of Wolverhampton. So Rob and I work in the School of Humanities. And I will tell you a bit more about what we do in more detail later. So what we're doing today is to celebrate the publication of this book. And it's not just the book that we are celebrating, but we're also celebrating the Black country culture and history in more general terms. And we've got this cracking lineup for you this afternoon. We've got a psychologist, we've got a linguist, we've got various creative writers who are going to talk a bit about the kind of project that we have been working on, and that project is called Snidge Scrumpin. Rob, can I just ask you to unmute yourself and say a bit about the title? What does Snidge Scrumpin mean?
Thanks for asking, Baz, and welcome everyone. It's great to see so many faces and so many people joining us this evening. So the term Snidge Scrumpin has a literal translation of nose picking, and we use these dialect terms to think about the way in which smell can offer really interesting ways of bringing about interesting memories.
Great, thank you, Rob. The connection wasn't too good. So, but what it kind of means is snidge is your nose, and scrumping is foraging. It's kind of roaming around and smelling all sorts of different things. And Rob came up with a title, and became this kind of lovely kind of title for the project, which has a long kind of history. I'll tell you a bit more about that in a second. But I just want to say something more about the book, because it is a radical interdisciplinary book. Okay, it is drawing on language and literature. It's got about 14 creative writing contributions, but it also draws on philosophy, sociology, on psychology, and Tom Mercer, my colleague in psychology, will do a little experiment with you a bit later on, the smell experiment. So it's really a project that unites all these different disciplines. And what we can say in a way is that literature is so important because it is a kind of a discipline that unites all these disparate kinds of philosophies and angles onto the world. Okay, so that's really, really important to kind of consider that this book is highly interdisciplinary. I'll thank people a bit later, but first I will go back into the kind of history of what we have been doing, the Snidge Scrumpin project. So it started, I guess, about a long time ago with the Proust phenomenon. So Marcel Proust was a writer, of course, living 100 years ago. And one of the things that he kind of discovered was that smells have got this kind of privileged way of unlocking highly emotional childhood memories. And if you've read In Search of Lost Time, you remember the scene in which he lies in his bed. He always lies in his bed, but taking a cup of tea and dipping a Madeleine cake in it. And when he does this, the taste and the smell sort of trigger these childhood memories, and that has become the Proust phenomenon. And ever since, psychologists and neurologists have been trying to understand what is happening, and they have slowly discovered that smell has this kind of direct connection with parts of the limbic system that are involved in generating emotions and memory. So that has become an object of investigation, and my own project, the Memory Network, has been doing various forms of research into that. What we have done in Wolverhampton, or in the Black Country, was to rethink that Proust phenomenon. And we were thinking, what if we look at a specific region, the Black Country, for instance, and think about what specific smells are associated with that area, because it has such a rich cultural history and such an industrial kind of heritage. So those were kind of the kind of ideas that where we started to kind of map those smells, but also think about what memories belong to those specific smells. So this is what we were doing. We were trying to produce this olfactory cartography, I guess, of a communal collective memory, and that became Snidge Scrumpin. So we need to go back to 2018 when the project started, and of course it started in Dudley. No, it didn't start in Dudley, actually. It started in London. It started with the Being Human Festival, where Kerry Hadley-Pryce, Tom Mercer, and Rob and I were doing all these experiments with the general public. We were asking them to blind smell all these tubs with specific kind of smells that they had to identify and see if it elicited specific memories, okay? So we then went back to Dudley, to the Black Country Living Museum and the Wolverhampton Art Gallery to look at how locals were kind of looking at smells and see if it was evoking specific memories. So it's really a fantastic kind of time back then. This is the team at the Black Country Living Museum in 2018. On the left-hand side, you've got Professor Barry Smith, who's a philosopher of the senses, and he's partly part of the team and kind of helped us design the experiments. We then went to the Wolverhampton Art Gallery, and yeah, it was a great success. And this kind of was the moment where we decided to do more experiments. And we were literally putting our research on the map, and we were putting the Black Country on the map, basically. So here you see a map that we produced, and the different dots with the different colors represented memories of specific smells. So it was really a creative, critical time for us. It was really, really fun, but also quite serious, because we're doing kind of something radically innovative, okay? Rob did other experiments in the Black Country. Tom and I went to the House of Lords, where we presented our research to peers and lords and various politicians. Here we are at the Birmingham Literature Festival in October 2018, I believe, where we're doing more and more of these events. So it was really fun, and yeah, we were getting a kind of message out there. And one of the key messages was that smell awareness is very important. We need to be much more attuned to specific sense, but particularly smell, because we never think about smell. In 2019, Kerry Hadley-Pryce and Nile Griffiths, we went to Romania. We did our experiment also in Romania with about 50 local people from the Transylvania region. It was really fun. So more experiments, getting the word out. It was really a lovely, lovely time. And then it was back to London. We were again invited to showcase our kind of research at the Being Human Festival. It was really fun and wonderful. And then I think I'd like to ask Rob, if the connection is all right, to say something about, I guess, the kind of really the summit of what we were doing, which was a multi-sensory tour across the Black Country called Making Sense of the Black Country. Could you say something about that, Rob?
Absolutely. Thanks very much. So yeah, the year after this, we joined up once again with the Being Human Festival and put on this day-long event, which we called Making Sense of the Black Country. And this was a great, long psychogeographic walk across Wolverhampton, out to Wednesbury, down the Cut to Great Bridge, and then onto the Dudley Tunnels, stopping at different places to run further experiments and think about the different senses and the different sense of place from these really important Black Country locations. We welcomed the very brilliant Roy McFarlane in to start the event off at St Paul's Church in Wolverhampton. That was my little daughter shouting in the background. She has to put a two-penneth in every few moments. He kick-started the pilgrimage with these beautiful words of poetry from his debut collection from Nine Arches Press. We had a really wonderful linguistic mapping of space as we walked around and paid attention to the different signage and graffiti and all sorts of different words in Wednesbury. Big thanks to our linguistics team at Wolverhampton. And then we moved on to Great Bridge, where we did some more Snidge Scrumpin and welcomed Wednesbury Poet Laureate Brendan Hawthorne to share his sensory poems with us as well. And then onwards to the Dudley Tunnel and Canal, where I had the great pleasure of sharing one of my geological poems underneath Dudley, right in the middle of the caverns and underneath the great big limestone cliffs, which is probably still the highlight of my career so far. And then we had a great right underneath the Renner. And then we had a really lovely and brilliant celebration at the Black Country Living Museum at the end of that. And it taught us a lot about the way in which art and movement and the humanities can join together with these sort of data-led psychological experiments as well. So thank you.
Absolutely, Rob. And yeah, I wasn't present, but the poem that Rob performed in the canal was really praised by all. It was really the highlight of the day. So really well done. Here you can see Michael Eads, who is the Being Human Festival curator, being kind of really sort of praising Rob for that poem. It was kind of really the climax to a wonderful day-long experience. This is something that we were still doing. We were invited to Amsterdam. We had invitations to go to Ireland. So basically, it was really going well, but then the pandemic hit, of course. One of the things that Rob and I were working on was with the Wolverhampton mayor to establish a kind of a series of walking events, which would again be kind of multidisciplinary events, drawing on all sorts of different contributions by poets, by religious leaders, but of course the pandemic hit, and then we had to stop this particular project. But Rob will towards the end say something about the future plans that we have. So I don't want to get too much into a lecturing mode, but we have achieved quite a bit, I feel. It's not just a book and a couple of events, but we really have been able to shape positively the public perception of the Black Country across not just the region itself, but also across the nation and even internationally. So we've really sort of put the Black Country on the map. We've created a national, international visibility of the culture. And yeah, we've also, by working with the Black Country Living Museum, we've been able to enhance cultural preservation and also the interpretation of people working at the museum, for instance. So there's loads of things that we have achieved, and today is that moment where we celebrate those achievements. And these are some of the partners that we work with. This is how we create a network, a solid, robust network where you can have longevity and continue to promote the work that we do. So I'm just going to take a moment just to think about a number of people and partners that have been really instrumental. And I guess that the Being Human Festival has been really seriously backing us. And we really want to thank Michael Eads and Amanda Phipps for backing us. They have been funding us. They have been distributing amounts of funding so we could organize our experiments. The Black Country Living Museum have been extremely valuable partners. We've been doing lots of experiments on their premises. They've been making spaces available for free. So thank you very much, and we look forward to continuing our relationship. The Wolverhampton Art Gallery, again, a key cultural partner. that has enabled us to communicate our work to the audience, both in Wolverhampton, but beyond that as well. Jonathan Davidson of the Birmingham Literature Festival and Writing West Midlands again has supported us, and we've built up such a strong relationship with him. So thank you very much, Jonathan. Anna Karina Schneider in Romania has been very kind to us in inviting us to do our experiments in Transylvania. Obviously a very exciting place to be anyway, but now we were kind of mapping the local Romanian smells and foodstuffs, really wonderful stuff. Palgrave, obviously, for putting out a book. They're really a wonderful partner to work with, very pleasant publisher. The Black Country Studies Centre, which is a kind of a venture between University of Wolverhampton and the Black Country Living Museum, is thanked for promoting our work. So we look forward to organising more events, particularly when the pandemic is gone. So those are some of the key partners I wanted to kind of thank. There are some other people. So Nile Griffiths, who was our colleague at Wolverhampton. He was a professor of creative writing. He's obviously still involved in the project. He does events with us now and then. He also came to Romania. So thank you, Nile. He has been kind of giving a blurb for the book that we've just put out. He says it's a tender, angry, kind, funny, and diverse. And he even said that reading this book is a physical thrill. So thank you, Niall. We completely agree with that. Of course, we would say that. Will Self has prefaced the book, and we want to thank Will. He's come out to the Black Country a couple of times, and he has read our book, and he's written a preface, and he says that the Black Country is the true heart of Britain. And he also says that the Black Country is a spatio-temporal synecdoche of the island itself. So rather than the Black Country being maybe neglected or overlooked, it is actually the core of understanding the state of Britain in the 21st century, okay? So we want to thank all of the contributors in the books, and you'll see some of them later on today, reading from their work. I want to thank in particular Tom Mercer. Thank you, Tom. It's been a great journey, which is still ongoing. And thank you very much for helping us to roll out these experiments. It's been really a creative, critical journey. I want to thank Wolverhampton's Vice-Chancellor, Jeff Layer, for his commitment to Black Country culture and for his support of the Black Country Studies Centre. Yeah, I'm forgetting quite a few people, I guess, but I really need to thank all of our colleagues in the School of Humanities. It's a wonderful bunch. We are undertaking cutting-edge research at a very difficult time, okay? So we must not lose faith in the role of the humanities, okay? We will be back. We're having a hard time, but as we can see through building these partnerships, we will make it through this moment of crisis. And continue to educate people and push forward research. So, okay, so those are my thank yous. There's probably people I'm forgetting, but I want to move on and take some time to introduce you to Julia Clark, Professor Julia Clark, who is the Deputy Vice-Chancellor at the University of Wolverhampton for Student Experience. And I'd like to ask Rob to formally hand over the first copy of the book, virtually, in fact, to Julia. So if you could do that, and Julia, if you would mind saying something about the university's kind of commitment to Black Country culture, regional values, regional culture, and maybe the university's role as a regional university for the West Midlands. So Rob, would you please hand over the copy?
It gives me enormous pleasure to show everybody this book, and it would be lovely to do this in person, but virtually I would like to pass this book over to our Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Professor Julia Clark. Here you go.
Thanks, Rob. Unfortunately, the book seems to have transformed into a different book, but I'm sure we can sort that out eventually. So, but thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me along this evening. It's certainly been educational so far, being involved in this project and understanding what you're doing as somebody who is new to the Black Country and hence new to the smells of the Black Country. But in the context of what we're doing as a university, this is really, really important. So our vision for 2030 is to transform the leadership and workforce of our place through inclusive student success and world-class research. It's nothing about transforming the smell of our place, but that perhaps does bring home to you how important place is to us as a university. Is one of, we have two pillars in our vision. One is inclusive student success, the other is place, because our students are largely from our place, stay within our region and contribute to our region. And we are the only university in the Black Country, and that's really, really important to us. I think in terms of this project as well, the emphasis on interdisciplinarity, the way that if you look at the book, it's bringing together literature, psychology, neuroscience, sociology, history and creative writing. That really says something about us as a university, the drawing together of those subjects and understanding the richness of our lives within the university and outside of the university. So I'm really pleased to be the first recipient, almost virtually, of the new book, and I do look forward to receiving the virtual copy and being able to read it, because I think the points that Baz has just made about the humanities and the importance of humanities, because we're living through a pandemic at the moment, and perhaps, you know, it's ironic that in COVID, one of the symptoms of COVID is loss of smell, but that sense of loss that we're living with as a country at the moment is very, very, very difficult, but more difficult in regions such as ours, because the pandemic has not affected everybody the same. We talk about, you know, we're all in this together, but we might all be in the same storm, but we're in different ships. And that recovery from the pandemic is going to rely on not just economic regeneration, but social regeneration, and the humanities has to be a major part of that. So I'm so proud of my colleagues here at the university and everything they're doing and the way that they're putting the Black Country on the map. So thank you, and thank you for inviting me to this evening.
Thank you very much, Julia, and enjoy the book. It will at some point become the actual book, I hope, not Graham Greene.
Sorry about that.
That's right. So just a note, because we're going to move on to the next element, which is a nice kind of it's a smell experiment, a smell test. But if you have any questions or comments, can you put these in the Q&A box? Okay, we're using the Q&A box. So any comments on what we've said, or maybe some questions, do put them in the Q&A box, which Rob will pick up, because I can't see the Q&A box. So Rob, we can keep an eye on that. That'd be great, and we'll be using the Q&A box a bit later as well, because we got a dialect experiment with Esther Asprey. But now we are going to a psychological experiment. I'm going to hand over to Dr. Tom Mercer, who is a psychologist at the University of Wolverhampton. Tom, take it away.
Thanks, Baz. Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm going to be going through the actual results of the Snidge Scrumpin experiment shortly. But before that, we thought it'd be a bit fun to do a demonstration to kind of give you a sense of what we were doing in the Snidge Scrumpin project. So a bit strangely, I've asked you to try and find two smells in your home. Just anything with a smell would be perfect. Two different items. So if you've got food or drink, that's perfect, but anything else with a smell would do for this. And if I just give you a moment to kind of find something you could use for this demonstration, whilst you're doing that, I can give you a bit of the background. So I'm a cognitive psychologist. That's all about using the scientific method to try and understand how the mind actually works. And for the purposes of this project, we were looking at something called autobiographical memory, which is the kind of long-term memory for the events of your own life. And as Baz is mentioning, we're trying to see whether smells could trigger certain autobiographical memories. So once you've found something, we'll move on to the actual demonstration, which we'll do in the form of a poll. But basically, I'll just be asking you to try and rate this smell on different dimensions and see if it triggers any memories as well. And what you can do is put in anything into the chat if you're happy to do that. So any smells you use and any memories triggered, feel free to make use of the chat as well. But if we can move on to the next slide, and if you've got something you can now use as a smell, hopefully, we'll go on to the smell one and launch the poll as well, if that's okay. Hopefully that will pop up in a moment. Okay, excellent. So you can see the poll here. So if you can take your item and just give it a smell, we then just ask you to work your way through these questions here. And this is very similar to what we did in the actual project. So you see, we're asking people to rate how familiar the smell is, firstly. From 1 is not at all, through to 5 is extremely familiar. And you can just kind of indicate whatever your response is there. You then do a similar thing for question 2, which is how intense that smell is. So how strong is that smell? From not at all intense through to extremely intense. And this is just based on your own kind of responses, your own ideas. There's no right or wrong answers. Question 3 asks you about how pleasant that smell is. So again, is it not at all pleasant through to being extremely pleasant? And the last question, particularly relevant to this project, is whether that smell helps you remember a specific event. We're just asking you this here about if this is yes or no, does it help you remember something or not? So if you've been able to do that, hopefully you can submit your responses. And once we've got some responses in, we're going to try and share the results. Now, I can't actually see if any responses have come through, but hopefully we do have some coming in there. If we do, are we able to share those results at this stage with people?
Yeah, so I can share the results, but I do have to end the poll to do that. So some people are still voting, so maybe if you give it just a little bit longer. Yeah,
that's perfect. Yeah, if you guys, I can't see it, so yeah, that's great. Yeah, but whenever it looks like we've had a decent number of responses, you can share those. Hopefully it's giving a kind of a sense of how this task was actually working when we did the real events.
Okay, great. So I'll end the poll now and I'll share the results.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you. Okay, so we can see some of the results coming in here. Now, obviously, in this case, everybody's choosing their own smells, whatever they can find, whereas in the real event, it was a bit more standardized, but it looks like you've chosen, smells that you're very familiar with, reasonably intense, reasonably strong. You've gone for pleasant smells, which makes sense. You can pick something that you actually like. Only interestingly, about 41% of people could remember a specific event in response to that smell. And that's important to stress. You don't always get this effect. Some smells are better than others at prompting memories. So if we close that poll and go on to the second smell, we're just doing kind of the same thing again, really. So we'll close off that poll, give you a chance to do the second smell now that you're a bit more familiar with how this task actually works. So there we go. I've got the same poll again. Hopefully you can see that. But yeah, just doing the same thing, going through familiarity of the smell, intensity of the smell, pleasantness of the smell, and does it help you remember any kind of event? If you just submit those when it's done. Yeah, so there's an example of a smell coming through a vinyl recording and guitar, which is interesting. And you could really use anything here, anything that gives a smell. in our own tasks, we tried to vary this, use a wide variety of smells as well, which I'll tell you about shortly. But once it looks like we've got some responses in, can we share those results as well? See if they look any different to the last ones.
Yeah, so people are still voting, so I'll just give it a little bit longer and then share.
That's perfect, thank you. Got an interesting comment in the chat as well about the Teddy Gray's tablets, which is actually one of the smells we used in the real experiment, and how that's prompting memories of childhood dentists and those kind of childhood memories, which is really interesting, because that's exactly the kind of thing that we were looking at here, and some of the similar findings were coming out of the project. So that's great. And if anyone else wants to share anything in the chat, you're very welcome to do so. So yeah, there we go. There are the results. So again, kind of a similar sort of pattern emerging. We're looking at these kind of generally familiar smells. They're not always that strong a smell, though. The majority are just slightly intense, and some smells can be quite subtle, a range of pleasantness, but again, they tend to be on the more pleasant side. And in this case, we're actually seeing quite a lot of people were remembering a specific event in response to that second smell. So seeing there a difference between the two smells. So that's great. Thanks everyone for doing that. If we move on to the next slides, we can actually show you some of the results of the experiment. So in our actual task, with about 52 participants, we had 8 different smells, and they were contained, if you can see these, in these kind of little tubs. And what we did was to try and hide the contents of the tub. So you only got the smell, that was all you had to work with. We didn't tell people what the smells were either. Of those 8 smells, 4 of them were designed to be quite general. So that was lemon, paint, curry paste and soap. And 4 of them were meant to be more linked with the Black Country, and that included smells of canal water, burnt rubber, Teddy Gray's herbal tablets, and faggots, those kind of meatball things. Very similar to what you did, we asked people to try and rate the smell, so the same kind of questions you got here. We asked them to try and identify that smell as well. Once they'd done that, they went on to try and recall a memory. But rather than asking people if they could recall a memory, yes or no, we actually got people to describe the memory, try and date that memory. So when did the event happen? And they rated the memory on how significant, detailed and pleasant it was as well. So if we move on to the next slide, we can look at some of the results from the smells themselves, so the properties of those smells. That will hopefully show up on this next slide in a moment. But we basically found that participants found it very difficult to identify the smells. Less than half of the time they could actually tell us what the smell was. And even with a very strong and distinct smell like paint, only 2/3 of people got that smell correct, and that was the best of all of them. Sometimes the answers were completely wrong. So it is quite difficult to identify a smell, but we did find some differences between them. So the smell of burnt rubber didn't do that well, really. It was rated as unfamiliar, not that intense, but also very unpleasant. People didn't like the smell of canal water either, which kind of makes sense, but they did enjoy lemon and the Teddy Gray's herbal tablets. But we were finding those kind of differences in how people responded to the smells. And interestingly, women rated the smells as more intense than men, so we got a bit of a gender difference. But for us, the really important thing is how this connects to memory. So on the next slide, we see some of the information about the connection with memory. So people were recalling memories to about 60% of our smells on average, but we found that 3 smells in particular were quite good at helping people remember past events. That included the smell of canal water, paint, and Teddy Gray's herbal tablets. It's in the graph at the bottom there. Those 3 smells, you were more likely to recall a memory than not. For the other 5 smells, it was kind of a 50-50 split between remembering or not remembering. But the most important bit is how this connects with the Black Country. So if we move on to the next slide, what we did was to look at where people grew up, where did they spend their childhood, and we were able to divide people into those who grew up in the Black Country and those who grew up elsewhere. because smells often evoke childhood memories, this was really important to look at. And we found 2 smells in particular were having a clear effect here. So the smell of paint and Teddy Gray's herbal tablets will lead into memories rated as more significant or more important in people who've grown up in the Black Country compared to elsewhere. Those Teddy Gray's herbal tablets also led to memories that were rated as more detailed if people had grown up in the Black Country than elsewhere. And a bit surprisingly, paint, the smell of paint, led to memories rated as more pleasant for people who'd grown up in the Black Country than elsewhere. Now, the Teddy Gray's herbal tablets made sense because this was kind of one of our Black Country smells. Why paint had this effect is a lot more mysterious. But I think what it does show is that when you're looking at this Proust phenomena, you do need to think about specific smells. Some are much better than others. And you do need to look at the regions as well. And you may find people responding differently to certain smells based on where they've grown up. So that's just a quick snapshot of the results. It is outlined in more detail in the book. But thanks for listening. I'll hand back to Baz and Rob for the next part.
Great, thank you. That's really fascinating, and yeah, again, looking at the chat, I mean, people really respond to these types of experiments and to smells. Right, we're running. I wouldn't say slightly late, but we're getting on. So let's introduce some of the poets who are in our book. Rob, would you mind introducing Brendan, Emmer, and Natalie, please?
Yeah, thanks very much, Baz. So a major part of the smell memory and literature in the Black Country book is the creative responses. We set out as a unit, as a gang, really, to try and map the Black Country in various different ways, historically, through literature, through smell, through data, and being aware that it is part imagined and part factual. We thought the creative responses were a really important element of that. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce some poets to you this evening to share their work. And I'd like to welcome, first of all, the Wednesbury Poet Laureate and award-winning dialect writer, Brendan Hawthorne.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. The poem that I've got in the book is called Go and Fetch the Tundish, which is in Black Country, in standard English, go and fetch the funnel. And hopefully it'll all work its way through. When a chill gripped the house away from the coal-filled hearth, he'd put on his overcoat, tilt his trilby, knot his muffler, put a few bob in his trouser pocket and carry the empty gallon jerrys up to the hardware store. He'd always fetch blue, never pink. Blue burned clean, but was expensive. Pink smoked, but was cheap. And when he got back, the familiar smell of paraffin pervaded the house with domestic gas oil tank. He'd say, go and fetch the tundish, me lad. He'd place his snub end on Park Drive fag down on the top of the powder-coated case. And then as a kid, I'd follow him around the house, popping up the Valeritas with the glug, glug, glug through the time-faded tundish. Oh, she did, he'd say. And with an expert eye and a steady hand, he dispensed the cobalt-coloured liquid that glistened like sapphires in the half-light. And I'd watch the diamond-shaped crystals turn from clear to black, from empty to full on the filler tank. We started in the veranda first, then the sitting room, and after careful trim of the wicks, we'd set about ready to ignite into that dancing blue ring of heat, with a spark and a touch of the sulphurous brimstone strike of a Swan Vesta match. The glass would be brought down slowly to rest, careful not to tilt bowspring on the snuffer. He closed the bright orange door, and the heat would satisfactorily drift from the vents. He'd then store the cans back in the privy, the tundish wiped free of residue and placed over the cap for one of the cans. I'd feel cosy and warm between the heat of coal and the smell of paraffin. And several years later, when he'd gone, and I had to sort a few things out in the cold light of day, I noticed that he'd left enough fuel in those jerrys to top up the heaters once more. The tundish remained placed to the side, and I knew what I had to do when I heard him say in my memory, "Go and fetch the tundish, lad. Go sheed it. Careful with the snuffer. Get the trimmer, you'll need it." And I realised that the ritual, after all these years, had been passed on from him to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brendan. That was Brendan Hawthorne, everybody, with his wonderful poem. Our next poet for you this evening is a poet and novelist. He's a real mover and shaker in the Black Country scene and really responsible for helping push the Black Country culture further afield as well. She is currently the Poet Laureate of the City of Wolverhampton, and I'm very pleased to welcome her, Emmer Purshouse, everyone.
Cheers, thanks Rob. I've just got a short poem and it's connected to Teddy Gray's herbal tablets. It's called An Idea Once Crystallized. Maybe it was a weird thing to do, to send a paper bag full of suck in the post, not so much as a note. Their smell permeating the jiffy bag, waiting to waft out into your room. That heady mix of the medicinal and the factory, filling your air with the sort of smell you might put on a wound or a scratch where the swarfers bit. The sort of smell that might, one cold night, remind you of home, of me, of the Black Country.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you very much, Emmer Purshouse, everybody. As Tom just mentioned, the Teddy Gray's Herbals was a real big hitter for us in terms of the memories that it evoked and the different kinds of memories that it evoked. And I think quite a lot of that is really nicely put together in that poem. Our third poet for you this evening is someone you might recognise from recent television performances and media spots, a really fantastic writer and sharp poet, the wonderful Kuli Kohli.
Thank you very much, Rob. I live in Gawthorne Park via the Dudley Road. So this poem is about my area and the smells that we encounter. And it's got some Punjabi words in it. Dosa is an Indian savoury pancake made from rice flour. Jalebi is an Indian sticky sweet street food. Gurdwara is a Sikh place of worship. The langar is a feast kitchen. And dal, roti and chai are lentils, chapati and tea. So this is my poem. It's called Gawthorne Park via the Dudley Road. In suburbia, the trees shake hands, arching over the streets of Gawthorne, leafy mowed lawns where roses, lavender, mock orange scent the air. Frustrated fumes of early morning traffic taken in standing at the bus stop shelter waiting while the locals are on the scheduled school run. Watch where you step, though. Judge street litter, the pong of dog, fox, rat, badger and bird droppings. The rain washes it away every now and again. 2 minutes down the road, a giant Aldi stands. At the Fighting Cocks Junction, Shopper's Paradise, tantalising smells where Europe meets the globe. Dudley Road's exotic aromas diffuse and entice. Masala dosa, fish and chips, grilled meats, sweet warm scribbles of saffron jalebis to satisfy appetites, a welcoming of calming sandalwood and incense, Eastern flavours at the Blake and Hall shopping precinct, mouthwashing watering, whiffs of exotic fruits and herbs. The good weather, golden dome beach and the community in supplies of flour, grain, expressions of appreciation, free fresh food in the langar hall, dal, roti, spice chai. Returning after work is like arriving home to the Punjab. Strong fragrances of fried onions, garlic, ginger, chili, turmeric, garam masala, coriander in easterly breeze. Thank you.
That's the brilliant Kuli Kohli, everybody. And I really love that poem. And in many ways, I think that really helps sum our book up nicely, because on the face of it, it's just a very simple bus journey from one stretch of High Street to the bottom, but it's full of all of this sensory, it's a feast of the senses. Beautiful stuff. The fourth and final poet of this section is a really wonderful writer who I admire a great deal, and was one of the Carol Ann Duffy's Poet Laureate Choice poets for her collection Urban Drift. This is the very brilliant Natalie Burdette.
Thanks, Rob. We try to keep Sunday best, though Mum hates Sundays. After church, we drink iron brew. White beefy crisp crumbs from faces with the backs of hands as Mum and Dad pulled out the twin tub, pushed it to the sink to fill. Its whir spreading chlorines shock through heavy whites. Bleach mist making windows opaque. Our boredom simmered with the powder's garden fresh green flecks. Their faces reddened, hauling dripping towels from washer to spinner like drowned otters on the boiler stick. Bone pale, cracked, but strengthened by hot, cold, dry, wet. Last, the dark loads, incense and grit, swirled the space pattern drum with soft rinse water, slippy, blue. Gathered a tang of rubber splurging through the curved grey pipe. Then a final tipping up. A cabbage pan rattling too now, mixing iron with clean steam, fat spitting in the pudding tray, hot, dangerous. Roast potatoes, salt crisp, turkey roast shrinking from its paper wrap, meat fat, the brittle smell of the oven's glass door, the dog under Mum's feet and us not helping, and homework not even started yet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Natalie Burdette, everybody, and our fantastic poets. That's a little sniff at what's inside smell, memory and literature in the Black Country. I would say pardon the pun, but I wouldn't be serious in that. So I guess you've had a little bit of the psychology, you've had a little bit of the poetry, you've had some thoughts from me and Baz about this book as well. We're going to ask you to get involved a little bit more now, I suppose. It gives me really great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, who has contributed an essay on Black Country dialect and language and the senses in this book. It's the newest member of the University of Wolverhampton School of Humanities, the very brilliant linguistic gymnast Esther Asprey.
Oh, very much, Rob. So it's really nice to see everybody. I'm sorry, my lighting's gone a bit peculiar. My face looks quite spectral. We're going to, with Baz's help going through the slides, I'm going to just give you 10 Black Country words that in the course of writing the chapter for this book, some of them I knew, some of them I was going through old dialect glossaries. I was going through interviews that I'd done in the past with people. And some of these words are older than others. Some of them really only turn up in certain bits of the Black Country, but there's always room for surprises. So I just want you to see if you know what they mean, and we'll use a chat box for that. So if you put your answers into the chat box, have a go, have a guess. I think Baz is going to take us through the slides. Yep, okay. Let's see what you make of this one. What's an omag? Okay. Okay. What's a hammock food? Bed. Sleep house. Okay. Any more for any more? Yeah, and I mean I thought it was a hammock, but it's a word picked up in Albury, and it's aha. Well done. Big first prize to Sarah. First prize. Yeah, it's a big lump, a large portion, and the person who gave me the word said an omak of bread. An omak of bread is the end of a loaf, or you would have a big piece that you'd rip off, and you can eat it with cheese. So, or you can eat it with whatever you like. Okay, next word, please, Buzz. A gleed. Okay, this is not. I think lots of you will know this one, or maybe not. Maybe not. So this was one that there is a saying that, yeah, exactly. It's a yeah, and the mention of doors, it's something to do with the fire. It's yeah. I think the standard English would be an ember, right? So yeah, that's my grandma would have said that, but a voice like a gleed under the doer. Yeah, exactly. Brilliant. And I mean, if you've got a voice like a gleed under the doer, that's squeaky and high and sharp and makes you wince. So I love that one. I really love that one. Next one, please, Baz. Okay, let's see what you make of this one. Well, I knew one meaning for this, and this is why I was looking at this word, because this is a word associated with smells. And there's a pretty close standard English equivalent. So, I mean, prizes to anybody who knows what the standard English equivalent is. Yeah, yeah. This is the sense I knew. It's I mean, it's like rank in standard English, right? So you get hand on. It's ronk, it's rank, but it can also mean really good. In the same way that you get wicked. I had people in Bilston and Dudley saying, if you go and see a good band, it's a ronk band, Ronkswood in Worcester, lovely. So you wonder if the wood in Worcester was smelt bad, did it drain badly? That's lovely, brilliant, thank you. All these lovely words. Next word, please, Baz. Okay. Reesty. And I think quite a lot of us still hear this one, right? Exactly. So it is something that smells. Okay. Can it be a dirty look as well? Can you give someone a reesty look? I mean, they're just endlessly productive, and I can't tell you the answers. We all use them in slightly different ways, but it's nothing good, right? Reesty's nothing good. Something that smells bad. But the original meaning is bacon. The original meaning is sort of that the reest of bacon is the rind, and if it's cured too long, it smells weird. If you leave your bacon hanging too long, it just smells odd. If you put too much salt on it, it smells weird. Often said of chocolate, a bit nasty enough. Yeah, okay. So, and everybody remember reesty feet. Yeah, I mean, we could say cheesy feet. I guess it goes well with feet, doesn't it? And but it was definitely related to bacon. And it wasn't just a word used in the Black Country, actually. So we're back in the days when people were sort of home killing pigs and making their own sides of bacon. And so it's just a lovely one, isn't it? I like reesty feet. That's pleased me. Next word, please, Baz. Okay. Is this a Black Country word, everyone? You might want to have an argument about it in the text box. Has it become a Black Country word? It depends who you ask. If you ask the young'uns, then they will say, yeah, that's okay. So minging is, yeah, disgusting, nasty. Where did it come from? Any guesses? Where did we get it from? We've borrowed it from another group of speakers. Yeah, and it can mean ugly, right? If someone's a minger, it's quite productive. Somebody can be a minger. That's not a very nice thing to say, but that means I do not find that person attractive personally. Yeah. Well, it's from Scottish English, and I mean it's all over train spotting. Everything's minging. It can also mean, and it's used in Yorkshire too. Lovely. And I mean, how long has it been used there? Probably a long time, I suspect. If something mings, it smells. So the original meaning in Scots is the ming heap is the midden. So it smells of poop, basically. Yeah, and it's interesting. So is it turning into a Black Country thing? This is kind of what I'm asking. Has it come in, or has it always been there and we've just not noticed very much? But it's certainly used now in the Black Country. So it's one that my young speakers give me all the time, and they think it's Black Country. Next word, please, Buzz. Okay, robble. Okay, so it's a noun. We know it's a noun, and I'm pretty sure it's related to rabble. If we look at standard English, rabble, it doesn't actually mean a rabble, Jenny. It's a good guess. It doesn't actually mean a rabble, but it's kind of related to that sense of lots of things clustered together. Any other guesses for robble? No, sort of. Okay, it is a group of stuff, but it's a group of, when I was given it, they said like you could get your, I don't know, get your stockings in a robble, get your knickers in a robble, in a knot, in a sort of twisted knot. So the sense of something being a group, things all together and twisted up, is there, but it's like in a knot, in a mess, in a twist. That's a robble, and that was from very far south. So I think that was Cradley Heath that I got that one from. Okay, next word, please, Riffy. Yeah. Is it different to Reesty though? Why do we tolerate both of those? Is it different to Reesty? We have different senses. If something's riffy, okay. Is it the same as, and it's dirty? Yeah, yeah. So we have different levels of how many words we know, and we don't all know the same words, but there are some core Black Country words that we do know. Yeah, grimy. That's what people said. It's not that it smells, it's that they're dirty. Exactly. A riffy neck, as in go and wash your neck. I like that one. It's really good. Yeah, so the idea that it's probably somebody whose personal hygiene is somewhat lacking, yes, dust. Yeah, Riffy is less greasy than Reesty, and this is just lovely. The level of detail you get from people is just beautiful, and they do tend to agree. Clean your donnies, exactly. So go and wash your hands. Yeah, personal dirt again. Okay, I think that might be it. Is there one more? Yeah, okay. And we borrowed this. We borrowed this from our neighbours, so it'd be interesting to see if it's still around. Do we know what a keffel is? A certain sort of person. If someone's a keffel, what kind of person are they? It is. Aidan's right. It's the Welsh for a horse, so maybe it's gone. Maybe we don't know it anymore. It's a clumsy person, a big sort of ungainly person who knocks into the furniture, and but it did come from quite an old glossary, and I've only ever had quite old. Lovely. So we do have someone who still knows of it being used. So it is the image of a horse blundering around, I guess. It's a clumsy person. Yeah, and so that's kind of snetters. Rob, tell us about snetters in that chat box while I'm seeing if there's another one. Is there another word, Baz? Do we want to go on? I think that might be it now. We might have got canting. Okay. And we've been talking about canting quite a lot. What is canting? If you're canting, what are you doing? Yeah, talking is, yeah, chatting, usually over the garden gate, chatting. Yeah, nattering. I like these senses of chatting, nattering. It might not be important. You're not giving a speech for the United Nations, right? It's yeah, and it's usually said of women. Okay, maybe women are associated with doing it. I'm not sure that blokes can't, right? But it's possible that it is a loan word from Irish, actually. So I picked those two just because they are, I think they indicate how rich Black Country dialect is, right? We do borrow from the people who came to the Black Country. We've seen that, and it's just another example. So can't in Irish means to talk. I think that's it now. I hope that's given you an overview of the kind of stuff. Oh, mooching. Okay, last one. I think this must be the last one. What's mooching then? Yeah. When I was small, I picked this word up, but I didn't understand what it meant. I thought it meant walking around, and I think it does have that sense, but it's also looking for something, right? If you're mooching, you're going through things looking for something. And my dad taught me that word, but somehow the sense of looking for stuff didn't get passed on to me. Yep, exactly. Perfect. And we all knew that one. So it's really interesting to see which we know, which we don't know, which are older, which are newer. And it shows you, I mean, the dialect's still alive, right? Things are still coming into this dialect. Yeah, exploring without a purpose. Okay. I think that might be it. Is that it, Buzz? That's enough linguistics to throw at you for one day, I think. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you, Esther. That was wonderful, and really, really interesting to see all of these different dialect phrases and their connections with the senses, and that further connection to sense of place as well. So you can really see how the kind of web of identity within a site, within a locale, is really fundamental to how we see ourselves in the world and how others see us as well. Which is something that we really try to kind of push through with this book and the wider projects that have precursed it. What we would like to show you now is a further smell and sniff inside the cover of this book, with two really fantastic writers, two really important novelists from the region. Our first guest for this section is the amazing novelist who, in my estimation, is one of the most significant writers working at the moment. His work set in Black Country and Dudley predominantly is a really, really wonderful and exciting exploration of class and identity and love and hate and all of the nuances around that builds in this kind of peculiar web of place identity as well. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce dear friend of the University of Wolverhampton and mine, Anthony Cartwright.
That's great, Rob. Thanks a lot. That's a nice introduction. It's really been great to be part of this, and obviously thanks to everybody taking part tonight. So this piece is called Methyl Methacrylate and the Great Wolverhampton Novel. The Great Wolverhampton Novel smells of methyl methacrylate and traffic fumes and ash and iron and blood and rust, of course. But first, the methyl methacrylate. Like all great, definitive, exhaustive novels of place, a multi-generational, vast, sprawling epic, the GWN allows for various authorial interjections. Like, I didn't know it was called methyl methacrylate when I used to smell the stuff washing cars in the works car park at the Ford and Plastics factory. In fact, and this is like, we used to call it methyl methacrylate, but I had to check the pronunciation before I did the reading. And then where my dad worked, and where 1 or 2 afternoons a week, me and a mate would go to clean cars for £2 a time. The smell of the yard was that of very strong nail varnish remover, which overpowered even the ring road traffic fumes, and which was that of the methyl methacrylate itself. I hated the smell, but liked the work, especially when we had a tea break in the press shop, where they made cattle drinkers, with the supervisor, Alf, and the lads who worked there. Everyone was a real laugh. If I ever smell nail varnish remover nowadays, I think of Wolverhampton. My dad was pleased to tell me that methyl methacrylate was what they used to make the windscreen for Concorde, as well as the asterite sinks and baths in the factory. Apparently, it's sometimes used as a cement in hip and knee replacements today. Fordham's has long gone. The yard I wash the cars in is roughly where the next shop is on the St John's Retail Park, as it is now called. Supersonic travel replaced by dodgy knees. Factories, their smells and everything else replaced by shopping centres. There's some kind of Black Country story there, which brings us back to the Great Wolverhampton Novel, and how it opens on the aforementioned yard amidst factory ruins on a spring morning in the early 1990s, sometime between Fordham's closure and the retail park being built. A young man, still in his 20s, but having already lived 100 lives, called Billy Wright, not that one, lies face down in the yard, drunk, believing himself to be dead, and smells the distinctive smell in one of the fissures in the uneven concrete. Memories flood back to him of when he worked at Fordham's as a kid, just out of school, fetching and carrying in the press shop, and when he's transported to a happier, safer life, when he still had a family around him, and he enjoyed a pint at the club on a Friday night and going to the Molyneux on a Saturday, and sometimes later to the Speedway, and a game of tenpin bowling at the old wooden alley in Blakenell. And so he rises, alive after all, like the smell, taking the smell with him, as well as his own smells of dereliction, to find his lost family on a quest through the streets of Blakeney and Fighting Cocks and Park Fields. Cue to a chapter set in a bedroom high above the streets in one of the Blakeney high rises, where a very old man lies dying. His name is Billy Wright. Not that one either, but in fact the granddad of the young Billy Wright we've already met. Poised between life and death, he's taken to calling things out in recent days that no one can understand. Cut him open, Harry, he implores. Fuck it, I'll do it myself. He's surrounded by family and a priest that sits at the bedside delivering the last rites. A crucifix and portrait of Mary hang in the sunlight above the bed, remnants of his wife, a woman who had moved to the Midlands from County Mayo as a young woman and had died 10 years before. Father Joseph finishes the rosary, waits silently for a while, holding the man's hand, and gets up, conscious of having to return to church for the Angelus bells, conscious the man might die the moment he walks through the door, or go on for days yet. With a chorus of thank you, fathers, the young priest leaves, weighs up the merits of the stairwell or the lift. They smell the same. He thinks about getting such decisions wrong, with a difference sometimes between life and death, growing up in Maputo after the shooting starting. Weighs up how far 1990s Wolverhampton is from some kind of similar catastrophe, and goes for the lift. In the bedroom, Billy stirs slightly, lifts his dry lips to his eldest daughter's ear as she leans over the bed to hear him speak. I was at North King Street, he says. Tell your mother, when you see her, that I'm sorry. They are his last words. The great Wolverhampton novel smells of guilt and redemption. North King Street was a street in Dublin. At Easter 1916, it was on the edge of the area around the city's GPO, held by the IRA during the Rising. Soldiers from the South Staffordshire Regiment, having lost 14 men trying to advance down North King Street earlier in the week, rounded up 15 men on a Friday afternoon and shot or bayoneted them, dumping the bodies in cellars. One more small massacre on an island of them. The soldiers killed and those who did the killing were from Wolverhampton and surrounding areas. Billy, who his family know as a hero at the Battle of the Menin Road Bridge at the end of the First World War, with his medals in a shoebox at the back of the kitchen cupboard, had returned to England in 1919, worked in various foundries, met a nice Irish girl named Edna at a tea dance, enjoyed his holidays in Rhyl every year, raised 7 children, 18 grandchildren, at this point 5 great-great-grandchildren, and a great-great-grandchild no one is yet aware of, lived his life as a quiet family man, taking his wife to church, the church she helped clean 3 mornings a week, on a Sunday, and sometimes to the early mass on a Wednesday. Down on the street, Father Joseph passes the young Billy Wright, says a quick prayer for forgiveness as he steps out his way into the gutter and then across the road, as much to avoid the smell as the huddled figure himself, menacing though he also seems. By following his nose, the young Billy Wright is drawn closer and closer to the flat in which his estranged family's gathered and his granddad lies dying. It turns out that the young Billy is haunted by violence too, a street fight which brought his youth to an abrupt end, in which he stabbed the young man in the leg with a broken bottle, hitting an artery during a fight between white and Asian lads, in which he, wrongly, assumes to have caused the young man's death. He remembers the trail of blood as the kid hobbled up the street in front of him and into the back door of a shop which sold bright-coloured material for saris, the smell of a terrible fear, both the boys and his own. Billy had run too. When he returned to the shop a few days later, the place was boarded up, gone, as if it had never been there at all. When he asked the neighbours what had happened to the family who lived there, trouble, he was told. They've gone. So he went too, and never went home again, although never strayed too far either, careful not to be spotted, sleeping in old factories and drinking on the towpath of the cut. The great Wolverhampton novel has several different versions. In some, there follows a whole other epic story, a family story of a village a few miles from the line of control, high in the snow in Kashmir, and a family who end up in the back streets of Blakeney, not doing so badly all through the years, really, making a home in spite of Enoch Powell and all that, with a son who gets into the occasional fight, but nothing too heavy, until a daughter gets pregnant with a local black boy, and they move away to stay with a family in Small Heath in Birmingham, pretty much as far as they will ever travel, and get things sorted out, which involves the birth of a beautiful baby girl raised by her grandparents, who she thinks are her parents, with an auntie who will always look out for her, and another uncle with a vicious scar on his leg, who works as a barrister in London and sends her books to read. The great Wolverhampton novel sometimes narrates various other massacres associated with the town, not least the Battle of Woden's Field in 910, which is one of the reasons how it comes to smell of so much blood, whole rivers of them, so much iron, Saxon and Viking in this case, and an account of the riots following the death of Clinton McKerbin in police custody in Wolverhampton in 1987. There are other chapters which return to Blakeney and narrate the scene at St Luke's School on another 1990s morning when a man enters the playground with a machete and Lisa Potts covers the children in her care, and no one dies. The great Wolverhampton novel confirms the place as one of miracles as well as everything else. Some versions of the great Wolverhampton novel confront the smell of something rotten head on and give an account of Enoch Powell's life, his role as a Wolverhampton MP, the speech and the people who supported his views, as well as those who resisted. Billy Wright, who still lies dying in his bed high above Blakeney, had no time for the man, of course, instilled common decency into his children as much as he could, had seen enough hatred, been part of it well enough for one lifetime, kept it locked away inside him as well as he could. So, to cut a long story, and the great Wolverhampton novel, as yet unwritten, is very much that, short, the fading smell of methyl methacrylate works like incense in leading the young Billy Wright to his granddad's home in the hour of his death, to be reconciled with his mother, the old man's daughter, who is still mulling over the words about North King Street and thinking about how she may seek to forget them entirely. And we leave them rising, like the smells from the city streets, as if figures in a painting by Chagall, halfway to the sky. There sometimes follows a brief epilogue, with the family another generation on, the young Billy Wright restored, with a child of his own on his shoulders, watching the Blakeney flats being blown up, demolished, on another morning, early this century, and that old chapter smells of dust. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Anthony Cartwright, everybody. It's wonderful that your words are in our book. We're starting to come to a close for this evening, guys. Before I introduce our final reader for this evening, I just want to very quickly share and embarrass Paul MacDonald by sharing the dedication at the front of this book that me and Baz came up with. It's without Paul MacDonald's work building up to this, including the other writers that we've heard of this evening as well, but in particular Paul's work creatively and academically seriously paved the way for works like this. And so it's very important that we dedicate this to Dr. Paul MacDonald, the bellows in our hearth. From one really, really important figure to another in the Snidge Scrumpin experiments and this book. This final writer has been here right from the beginning of this project, and probably before that too. Really important in very, very early stages of getting the ideas together, and bashing ideas around together, and has always said yes to absolutely everything we've asked her to do, which is wonderful. Again, another really, really important and brilliant writer from our neck of the woods. closing our event this evening is the very brilliant Kerry Hadley-Pryce.
Thank you very much. Follow that, as they say. Okay. What does a Black Country childhood smell of? There is an elegant industrial quality to any Black Country childhood memory. But think of the smell of dogs and damp carpets, and mix in a sense of baking bread and cooling pastries and ripe apples and warm shoe leather and disinfectant. And think of that smell as something bright orange and glossy and clean. And you're in Briley Hill Market, or I am. Think of a burnt cream smell, toffee thick and lingering. And you're experiencing the exotic smell of sugar beet, wafting in all the way from Stourport through Kidderminster and through your windows into where you live. On other days, on other winds, that horse blankety, musty, wet metalness arrives like something creeping from Tipton or Dudley. It lies a little heavy inside you. It sticks inside your nose, inside your head with the frequency of a singing bowl. And then on Saturday afternoons, the scalded milkish smell of the ice cream van. Mrs. Harris, she made her own, and her son drove round our estate in a hired van that chugged out diesel in grey like a magic trail. And there are breweries, a few. The Bull and Bladder, Marpardo's, Banks's, layers of piney, grassy, banana-y air. It's your dad's breath on a Sunday afternoon, that is, like velvet being flapped, warming the place, then lying heavy. This smell, you think you're never going to stop experiencing it. It's more than just your history. It's like it becomes part of your biology. It's like it becomes a bulky weight you carry around with you, taking a place in your memory. In the summer, the factories clang with men's voices, slick with oil and fire, breathing out something primitive and vaguely thrilling. And of a Friday lunchtime, when factory workers finish early, take a breath outside a pub. The smell of beer like smouldering leaves is mesmerising. And everybody is smoking cigarettes, of course. And all that excites the moment you're in. Your granny's house smells of coal dust and woodbines and imperial leather and chamomile tea to settle her nerves. And there or thereabouts, there is a mashed potato smell from next door because it's Monday's bubble and squeak. She sends you to the outdoor, your granny does, to get your granddad's after work beer, 2 pints of Banks's Mile poured into a pop bottle. And even though the place is clean, the smell of dust and sweat is sour and earthy and bread-like. Because you're young, you imagine that's what men will smell like close to. And Christmases had their own smells. Your dad pours whiskey into a Stuart Crystal cut glass tumbler, just the one. And though it looks like something precious, this liquid gold, this Christmas drink, and he holds it like you've seen people on films hold similar glasses, to you, it smells of wet cardboard in bin lorries or Brasso and orange peel. But that smell, it will always remind you of your dad at Christmas. When Indian takeaways take up empty shops, it's suddenly exotic, like you're not in the Black Country anymore. Close your eyes and breathe in all those spices. It's almost medicinal, sharp. It billows out and around you like it's goading you to travel, to leave. But you still like the ripe tang of cooking oil being heated and potatoes being chopped and fish being battered and peas being mushed. And though you can't find the words sometimes, it doesn't matter, not really. Just take a breath, breathe in the smells and breathe out your memories. Thank you.
Yes, the
Great
very
stuff.
brilliant Kerry Hadley-Pryce, everyone.
Thank you. That was really, really lovely. It's so wonderful to see everyone together again, even though it's virtually. But it does give a sense of what the book is trying to do, right? It is trying to bring together all these different disciplines and have a new innovative way of thinking about the world, about our psychology, etc. So do buy the book, it's really great. We've got a couple of minutes, although I need to go because I need to teach in a second, but just reflecting back on the pandemic, and one of the questions in the chat was thinking about COVID and the loss of smell, and this is really an important kind of moment, I feel, and maybe reconfiguring what the priorities are, and maybe also putting different senses that are not just visual, because we're surrounded by screens all the time, but the idea that smell is very important for human behavior. It's connected to our psychology, to our unconscious, to sexuality, but it's also a sign of depression. So there's all sorts of avenues that we need to explore here, I feel. And of course, we have been doing that, and how smell is place bound is also extremely important. So with that in mind, I would just like to invite Rob to reflect on that and maybe say a few words about where is this going? Where are we taking this type of research? What are the next steps and plans?
Thanks, Baz. Yeah, so there's plenty more irons in the fire, to coin a blacksmith analogy. We've going forward, as things start to open up, and as Baz says, we need to kind of focus in on sensory self and sensory expressions of selfhood. We're going to be doing more and more of these sorts of experiments, and more of this type of research as the years go on. Most recently, we're going to be looking at the way in which we're playing around with the idea of the mapping and the moving side of these projects, as a sort of extension of what we did for the Being Human Festival with making sense and walking. We're going to start a series of sort of pilgrimages, I suppose. So this is the next sort of stage where we start to get more and more tactile with the way that we experience place, and then think about the ways that this then can reconfigure and subvert and play into and clash against our own sense of selfhood, our own communities as well. And that's one of many other very cool ideas that are coming out of the University of Wolverhampton and our School of Humanities.
And just to say, Rob, looking at the Q&A, we are having an impact. So we've got a participant who has suffered anosmia recently, and she's already saying that this evening, by just addressing smell and the importance of smell awareness, is helping her. So I think that's really wonderful, and yeah, we should really continue to create impact and put smell on the map. So I think we should maybe draw this evening to a close. I really want to welcome everyone who has participated. Thank you for your interest in the project. Do buy the book, it is fantastic. Also, of course, the contributors today. So Anthony, Kerry, Rob, of course, Esther, Brendan, Kuli, Emmer, and Natalie, thank you so much for taking the time to share your thoughts and your creative kind of mind with us today. Really wonderful. So, Rob, do you want to say goodbye and thank people as well?
Yeah, I'll just echo what Baz just said. It's really lovely that everyone's turned up this evening and tuned in to celebrate the Black Country, and to join us with sort of shouting it out and showing it off for the great region, an interesting region that it is, and that thanks to the people that are involved in this book, we're seeing more and more of, and the rest of the UK is seeing more and more of as well. So very much, guys, I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. We'll see you at an event in the near future. All right. Take care and see you soon.